My dog hated my fiancé. I should have listened. If you've ever owned a dog, you know they're more than just pets. They're family, furry little barometers of the soul. My golden retriever Buster was my heart on four legs. He was the epitome of a good boy, well-behaved, intuitive, and my constant shadow for 5 years. That's why, when my perfect fiancé, Mark, entered our lives, I was baffled. From the moment Mark stepped through our door, a switch flipped in Buster. The gentle, tail-wagging soul I knew became a snarling, barking sentinel whenever Mark came near me. I made excuses. I thought it was a phase, a weird territorial quirk I could train out of him. I was wrong. Buster wasn't being difficult. He was trying to scream a truth I was too blind, too in love to see. The secret Mark was hiding wasn't in his past or in his phone. It was a physical, chilling reality, locked away just feet from where we slept, in our own garage. This is the story of how my dog tried to save my life, and the horrifying price I almost paid for not listening. I remember the day I met Mark, with the kind of crystalline clarity usually reserved for moments of great trauma or profound joy. It was a sunny Tuesday, and I was at my favorite coffee shop, wrestling with a faulty Wi-Fi connection and a deadline that was mocking me. He was sitting 2 tables away, a book in his hands, a small, knowing smile on his face as he watched my growing frustration. He didn't offer help in a condescending way. Instead, he just waited for me to huff in defeat, then he caught my eye and gestured to his own hotspot, a silent offer that felt like a lifeline. That was Mark. Thoughtful, perceptive, and effortlessly charming. Our courtship was a whirlwind of romantic gestures and deep conversations that lasted until the early hours of the morning. He was handsome, successful, an architect who spoke about buildings with the passion of a poet. He seemed, for all intents and purposes, perfect. And Buster, my sweet, goofy Buster, adored everyone. He was the kind of dog who would greet a burglar with a wagging tail and a slobbery toy, assuming they were just a new friend to play with. He'd never met a human he didn't like, which is why what happened next was so jarring. Mark came over for our 3rd official date. I'd cooked a mediocre pasta that he praised like it was a Michelin-starred meal. We were laughing on the sofa, the easy, comfortable silence of new connections settling around us, when Buster, who had been sleeping peacefully at my feet, lifted his head. A low, guttural growl rumbled in his chest, a sound I had honestly never heard him make before. I looked down, confused. His hackles were raised, his lips pulled back slightly to reveal his teeth, and his eyes were locked on Mark. Mark chuckled, reaching out a slow, steady hand. "Hey there, buddy, no need for that." But as his fingers got within a foot of Buster's head, the growl escalated into a full-throated bark, sharp and alarming. Buster shot up and positioned himself between me and Mark, a furry, snarling wall of protection. I was mortified. I apologized profusely, grabbing Buster's collar and pulling him back, murmuring reassurances that he clearly wasn't feeling. Mark was a gentleman about it, of course. He just smiled, though it didn't quite reach his eyes, and said that sometimes dogs just get a weird vibe. He suggested we give Buster some space. The rest of the evening was tinged with a strange awkwardness. I couldn't understand it. This wasn't my dog. In the 5 years I'd had him, since he was a clumsy puppy, he had been a beacon of gentle goodwill. I chalked it up to a fluke. Maybe Mark's cologne was too strong, or he'd moved too suddenly. It was a strange, unexplainable blip in an otherwise perfect evening. As Mark left that night, kissing me softly at the door, I watched him go with a flutter in my heart, pushing the incident with Buster to the back of my mind. It was just a weird phase, I told myself. It would pass. It had to. After all, I had just met the man I was going to marry. The weird phase didn't pass. In fact, it got worse. Every time Mark came over, the transformation in Buster was immediate and absolute. The moment the key turned in the lock, Buster would stop whatever he was doing, chewing his toy, dreaming in his bed, or begging for a scrap in the kitchen, and his entire body would go rigid. His ears would flatten against his head, and that low, menacing growl would start, a constant, ominous soundtrack to Mark's presence. It wasn't just a growl anymore, it was a cascade of aggressive behaviors. The barking was incessant, a series of sharp, deafening reports that made conversation impossible. He would pace back and forth, his eyes never leaving Mark, a predator tracking its prey. If Mark tried to approach me, to hold my hand or give me a hug, Buster would lunge. not to bite, but to insert himself forcefully between us, his body a tense, vibrating barrier. I tried everything. I bought training books, watched countless online videos on dog aggression, and even consulted a veterinarian who found no physical ailment to explain the sudden change. The vet suggested it might be anxiety or a territorial issue and recommended a professional behaviorist. I started creating Buster when Mark came over, but the sound of his frantic whining and clawing at the metal door was somehow more distressing than the growling. It felt like I was punishing my dog for being, what, protective? Instinctual? I was caught in an impossible emotional vice. On one side was Mark, the man who was everything I had ever wanted. He was patient, unbelievably so. He would bring expensive dog toys and artisanal treats, holding them out to Buster with a calm voice, only to be met with renewed fury. He never once raised his voice at me about the dog, but I began to notice a subtle shift in him. The patient smile would tighten at the corners, his jaw would clench almost imperceptibly as he wiped a string of drool from his expensive slacks. There was a flicker of something cold and hard in his eyes, a brief moment of pure, unadulterated annoyance that he would quickly mask. On the other side was Buster, my loyal companion, my first baby. His distress was palpable. He wasn't just misbehaving, he was terrified and enraged all at once. He would follow me around the house for hours after Mark left, his body pressed against my leg, as if afraid I might disappear. He'd wake me up in the middle of the night, whining softly, nudging my hand with his wet nose, his big brown eyes filled with anxiety I couldn't soothe. I started to feel like I was betraying him. I was choosing this man, this stranger, over the creature who had been my unwavering source of comfort for years. The breaking point came on a rainy Thursday evening. Mark and I were curled up on the couch, and he was telling me about his day, his arm draped casually over my shoulders. Buster, who had been seething in his bed across the room, suddenly bolted. He didn't bark. He moved with a silent, swift purpose I'd never seen before. He ran straight for us, and before I could even register what was happening, he sunk his teeth into the cuff of Mark's pants, tugging with all his might, a guttural snarl ripping from his throat. He didn't break the skin, but the message was clear. It wasn't a warning, it was a declaration of war. The incident with the cuff of his pants was the final straw for Mark. He stood up, shaking his leg free from Buster's grip, his face a mask of cold fury. He didn't shout. His quietness was far more terrifying. He looked at me, his eyes devoid of their usual warmth, and told me in a tone that was dangerously level that this could not continue. He said he couldn't live in a state of constant siege, that he couldn't build a future with me if a significant part of my life wanted to tear him apart. And then he delivered the ultimatum. It was him or the dog. The words hung in the air between us, sharp and suffocating. He framed it as a matter of safety and sanity, a logical choice for a couple planning their future. But to me, it felt like a test of loyalty, a cruel and impossible choice. How could I choose between the man I loved and the dog who had been my family through thick and thin? I spent the night in a fog of turmoil, Buster's head resting on my lap, his body trembling with occasional sleepy whimpers. I looked at his trusting face and felt a wave of guilt so profound it made me sick. Mark's ultimatum had forced a shift in my perspective. For weeks, I had been trying to figure out what was wrong with Buster. Now, for the first time, a cold, slithering thought crept into my mind. What if something was wrong with Mark? Buster's reaction wasn't just dislike, it was a primal, visceral rejection. It was the kind of reaction a wild animal has to a predator. I started replaying every interaction, every moment in Mark's presence. I remembered the way his smile never quite reached his eyes when he looked at Buster, the tightness in his jaw, the flicker of cold impatience. I thought about his past, which he spoke of in vague, generic terms. He had no close friends, no family he was in regular contact with. He was a self-made man, an island unto himself. I had once found it romantic and mysterious. Now it felt sinister. My suspicion, once ignited, began to burn brightly, casting long, distorted shadows over the perfect life I thought I was building. And my suspicion began to center on one specific place, the garage. It was a detached single-car garage, set a few feet from the back of the house. Mark had claimed it for his own storage shortly after we got serious, saying he needed a secure place for his architectural blueprints and expensive tools.
He had installed a new heavy-duty deadbolt on the side door, a gleaming brass monstrosity that looked out of place on our quaint little house. He was the only one with a key. He never went in there when I was home, or if he did, it was for a fleeting moment, always with the door closing firmly behind him. I had never thought twice about it. But now it became an obsession. It was the one locked door in our otherwise open life. What could a man who claimed to have no secrets possibly need to hide so securely? The garage was no longer just a building. It was a symbol of the part of Mark's life that was completely closed off to me.
And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that the answer to Buster's behavior was locked inside that room. The decision to investigate the garage felt like a point of no return. It was a betrayal, a violation of the trust that was the foundation of our relationship. But the ultimatum had shattered that foundation. He had forced me to choose, and in doing so had made me question everything. My mission began with a simple, desperate search for the key. I knew it had to be somewhere in the house. I waited for Mark to leave for work, my heart thumping a nervous rhythm against my ribs. I started with the obvious places: his dresser, the pockets of his coats in the closet, his desk drawers. Nothing. I moved on to less likely spots: inside books, taped under furniture, behind loose floorboards. My search grew more frantic, more invasive. I felt like a stranger in my own home, a trespasser in the life of a man I thought I knew. Hours passed, and my search yielded nothing but a growing sense of despair. He was too careful. The key wasn't just hidden, it was hidden with a precision that spoke of practice. Defeated, I sank onto the sofa, my eyes scanning the backyard through the sliding glass door. That's when I saw it. Tucked amongst the petunias by the back porch was a small, artificial rock, the kind people use to hide spare keys. It was so cliché, so obvious, that I had overlooked it. My hands trembled as I walked into the cool morning air and lifted the rock. There, nestled in the hollow underside, was a single, ornate brass key. It felt cold and heavy in my palm, a key to a truth I was no longer sure I wanted to unlock. My mind raced. What if I was wrong? What if I opened the door and found nothing but blueprints and tools? How could I ever explain this breach of his privacy? But the image of Buster's snarling face, the memory of Mark's cold ultimatum, pushed me forward. I had to know. I waited until the following Tuesday. Mark had an out-of-town meeting, a team-building exercise that would keep him away until late at night. The house felt unnervingly quiet. With the key clutched in my sweaty hand, I walked across the dew-kissed grass to the garage. The deadbolt was stiff, groaning in protest as I turned the key. The door swung open with a long, mournful creak, releasing a puff of stagnant air into the morning light. The smell hit me first. It was a peculiar mix of old paper, mothballs, and something else, something metallic and vaguely chemical, like old coins. The garage was dim, the only light coming from the single, grimy window on the far side. My eyes slowly adjusted to the gloom. It wasn't the neat workshop I had imagined. The space was dominated by a large, strange structure in the center, covered with a dusty canvas tarp. Along one wall were stacks of cardboard boxes sealed with packing tape. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, illuminating layers of dust and cobwebs. I took a hesitant step inside, my pulse hammering in my ears. I walked toward the nearest box, my fingers reaching for the flap of tape, my curiosity warring with a primal sense of fear. Just as my fingers made contact with the rough cardboard, a sound from the house made me freeze. It was the distinct, cheerful chime of my phone, signaling an incoming text message. My blood ran cold. Mark wasn't supposed to be back for hours. I scrambled back out of the garage, my mind reeling, pulling the door shut and fumbling to lock it. I sprinted back to the house, my heart pounding, to see a single text message on my screen from Mark. Meeting got canceled. On my way home. Can't wait to see you. I had almost been caught, and I now knew for certain that he was hiding something monstrous. The next few days were an exercise in deception. I became an actress in my own life, smiling when Mark came home, cooking dinner, and discussing wedding plans as if my world hadn't been tilted on its axis.
All the while, the image of the dark, cluttered garage burned in my mind. The covered structure, the sealed boxes, they were a puzzle I had to solve. My fear had been replaced by a grim determination. Mark's near-miss return had only solidified my resolve. He was hiding something, and whatever it was significant enough to warrant a heavy lock and a fake rock. I had to get back in there, and I had to be prepared. The opportunity came a week later. He announced he had to fly to Chicago for a conference, a 3-day trip. This time, I was ready. The moment his car disappeared down the street, I was in motion. I grabbed a heavy-duty flashlight, a box cutter, and my phone, fully charged. I didn't hesitate at the garage door this time. I unlocked it and stepped inside, leaving the door ajar behind me. The air was just as stale and foreboding as I remembered. I went straight for the boxes. Using the box cutter, I sliced through the tape on the top one. My heart was in my throat as I lifted the flap. The first thing I saw was a photograph. It was a faded picture of a smiling man with his arm around a woman, 2 young children at their feet. They were standing in front of a house I didn't recognize, a house that looked nothing like ours. But the man in the photo, he was familiar. He had the same dark hair, the same build as Mark. But it wasn't him. The eyes were different, warmer, kinder, filled with a genuine joy that I had never seen in Mark's carefully constructed expressions. My hands shaking, I pulled out more items from the box. There was a worn leather wallet. I opened it. Inside was a driver's license. The name on it was Alex Thompson. The photo was the same man from the picture. There were credit cards, a library card, and a faded photo of a baby, all bearing the name Alex Thompson. I dug deeper. I found old birthday cards, addressed to Alex, signed "With love, Mom and Dad." I found a high school diploma, a college degree, a social security card, all belonging to this Alex Thompson. It was an entire life, a complete identity, neatly packed away in a cardboard box in my garage. I moved to the next box, and the next. They were all the same. More photos of Alex and his family, his clothes, flannel shirts and worn-out jeans that were nothing like Mark's tailored designer wear, his books, his life. It was a collection, a meticulously curated archive of another person's existence. I walked over to the large, tarp-covered object in the center of the room. With a deep breath, I gripped the edge of the canvas and pulled. It fell away to reveal a large corkboard. And tacked to that board, like a grotesque obsession, were dozens more photos of Alex Thompson and his family. There were newspaper clippings about his successful local business, his community involvement. It was a shrine, a loving, detailed, and utterly terrifying shrine to a man who was not my fiancé. I sank to my knees on the cold concrete floor, the flashlight beam trembling in my hand. Who was Mark, and what had he done to Alex Thompson? My mind was a maelstrom of horrifying possibilities. Was Mark Alex's brother, a stalker, or something worse? The shrine felt less like admiration and more like a conquest. I forced myself to my feet and began a more methodical search. There had to be something that connected the 2 men, some clue that would unravel this nightmare. I went back to the first box, the one with the wallet and the photos. I sifted through the contents again, my fingers brushing over the smooth, worn surfaces of a life that wasn't mine. Tucked in the back of a photo album, I felt the rigid spine of a small leather-bound book. I pulled it out. It was a journal. The handwriting on the first page was elegant and neat. It belonged to Alex Thompson. I started to read. The entries were mundane,
Beautiful in their normality. He wrote about his daughter's first soccer game, his son's struggles with math, his wife's laugh. He wrote about his hopes and his fears, his love for his family. It was the diary of a good man, a loving husband and father. I read for what felt like hours, completely absorbed in this stranger's life. Then, about halfway through the journal, the handwriting changed. It became blockier, more angular, less practiced. A new entry began, dated about 2 years before I had met Mark. The words sent a chill of pure ice through my veins. I met him today, Alex Thompson. He has no idea who I am. He has the life I was supposed to have. The perfect family, the successful business, the respect of the community. He walks through the world so easily, so unaware of what he has. It's not fair. I've been watching him for months. I know his routines, his habits. I know him better than he knows himself. Soon, he won't have it anymore. Soon, it will be mine. I dropped the journal as if it had burned me. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just a shrine. It was a blueprint, a confession. I forced myself to pick it up again, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the pages. I read on, my stomach twisting with each word. The entries detailed a slow, methodical plan of erasure. He befriended Alex, insinuating himself into his life under a false pretense. He learned his mannerisms, his history, his secrets. The final entry in Alex's handwriting was a short, excited note about a new friend he had made, a man who was helping him expand his business. The next entry was in the monster's handwriting. The accident went smoothly. No one suspects a thing. It's amazing what people will believe when you give them a story they want to hear. I am Alex Thompson now. I have his life. But this town is too small, too full of his memories. I need a fresh start, a new city, a new wife to complete the picture. Someone who won't ask too many questions. Someone perfect. And then the last entry, dated just a month before I met him. I found her. Her name is Sarah. She's beautiful, trusting, and she has a dog. A stupid, loyal animal that will be a good test. If I can fool her, I can fool anyone. She will be the final, perfect piece of my new life. My trophy. The journal slipped from my fingers and hit the concrete floor with a soft thud. The dog. He had mentioned the dog. Buster hadn't been sensing a bad mood or a strange vibe. He had been sensing a void, a soulless creature wearing the skin of a man who had murdered his owner and stolen his life. Just then, I heard it, the sound I had been dreading, the unmistakable metallic click of a key turning in the front door lock of my house. He was back. He wasn't supposed to be back. Time seemed to stop, then fractured into a million panicked shards. The key in the lock. Mark was home. He was never supposed to be home. My mind screamed at me to run, to hide, to do something. But my body was frozen, locked in a state of pure terror. I was in the garage, the scene of his greatest crime, holding the journal that could condemn him. I scrambled on my hands and knees, shoving the journal and its contents back into the box, my movements clumsy and loud. I could hear his footsteps in the house, the familiar, cheerful whistle he always made when he came home. The sound, once so comforting, was now the soundtrack to my nightmare. I slammed the box shut, my eyes darting around the garage for a place to hide. There was nowhere. The door was still slightly ajar. He would see it. He would know. The back door of the house slid open. "Honey, I'm home," he called out, his voice echoing with a false cheer that made my skin crawl. "You won't believe it. The conference got cut short. Surprise!" His footsteps grew closer, moving across the patio, heading for the garage. I was trapped. I pressed myself against the wall behind the stacked boxes, my hand clamped over my mouth to stifle my ragged breathing. He appeared in the doorway, a silhouette against the bright sunlight. He saw the open garage door. He saw the flashlight on the floor. His head tilted, a gesture of curiosity that was now utterly reptilian. He stepped inside, and the mask he wore so perfectly began to dissolve. The charming smile faded, replaced by a cold, blank emptiness. His eyes, the eyes I had gazed into 1,000 times, were now the eyes of a predator. He didn't ask what I was doing. He didn't have to. He knew. He took a slow step toward me, his movements deliberate and unhurried. He wasn't Mark anymore, the loving fiancé. He was the man from the journal, the ghost of Alex Thompson. He told me, in a quiet, conversational tone, that he was disappointed. He had such high hopes for me, for our life together. He explained that he had a tracker on his car, a little precaution he took, and he had seen me come out here. He said it was a shame that he had forced his hand. He described in chilling detail how he had planned to stage a tragic accident for me in a few years, after the wedding, something that would make him a sympathetic widower. But now my curiosity had sped up the timeline. As he advanced, a cornered animal with no escape, I heard a frantic scratching from the house. I had locked Buster in the bedroom before I came to the garage, afraid he would give me away. The scratching grew louder, more desperate, followed by a series of sharp, frantic barks.
Then, with a splintering crash, the flimsy bedroom door gave way. Buster came flying out of the house, a golden streak of fury, and launched himself through the open garage door. He didn't hesitate. He didn't growl or bark. He lunged, not at Mark's throat, but at his legs, sinking his teeth into the man's calf with a ferocity born of pure protective instinct. Mark cried out in pain and surprise, stumbling backward. It was just a second, a single precious moment of diversion. It was all I needed. I didn't look back. I ran. I sprinted past the writhing pair on the garage floor, fumbling for my phone in my pocket. I didn't stop running until I was 3 blocks away, my bare feet bleeding on the hot pavement, my thumb hammering 911. The police found him there, with a still snarling Buster standing guard over him. In the end, it wasn't my detective work that saved me. It was the loyalty of a good dog who hated a bad man from the very beginning. I should have listened. I finally did.